Over the next few minutes, you're going to learn how to talk about gender to a 6-year-old who says she's been a boy since she was 2.5. And welcome back to Sitting in a Car. I'm Sarah Sproul, and I sit in a car each week answering a question to help you raise your confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. And the answer to the question this week is about gender, and it comes from the courage pillar, because there are so many times in parenting, but particularly in parenting where our mission is to build deeper connection by talking about sensitive stuff, where we need to show up as a courageous leader inside our family and take initiative and meet our child in places where we never thought we would need to. So the courage pillar provides us with support and information to start conversations, manage emotion around conversations, particularly for our child, help them feel heard and understood. Now, there are 12 components to the courage pillar, and we are going to have an overview of the top 3 today. There's no point being overwhelmed with information when change comes in families, not from from so much information, but more from taking action on information. So, what many parents may do when they have a situation like this is think about all the stories and all the pain and difficulty that they might have heard from other families who have kids who are questioning their gender, who are gender diverse in some way. And our brain will be going to the worst case scenario, because in our world it makes sense that we would do that when our child has so graciously told us something very central and important about their life and their world. It would make sense that we would go to worst case scenario. That is how human brains are designed, that we remember negative, dangerous things, because our brain and our nervous system is designed to keep us safe and to keep us alive. So it makes sense that we would go to worst case scenario. When you have an experience like this in your family, you might Googling about gender and young kids to see what the right thing is to do. You might start looking into healthcare situations and go to the sort of the far extreme of gender interventions. Look at all the things to do with medical and surgical stuff. And it makes sense, again, because as a parent we want to protect our child from pain and suffering and fear and anxiety, and the way to do that, sometimes we might think, is to get a lot of information so we can work out what the best thing is to do. I've learned that when parents particularly default to that, looking at all the negative things that go wrong and fearful about them, it's a surefire sign that the courageous tongue-tied parent effect is deeply entrenched. It means that while we might, in our mind, want to build deeper connections with our children as a general rule, when the courageous tongue-tied parenting effect is in full flow, we are generally, in an instance like this, operating in fear mode. And so that is the opposite or the antithesis of building connection. So building an evolved communicating family is one that is completely built on connection, where connection guides our thinking and our information gathering. So the courageous tongue-tied parenting effect will lead you to feel unsupported, fearful of the future, anxious and searching for support, maybe imagining that in some way your child is broken, or perhaps it's a reflection on you. Maybe you're completely focused on making sure you do the right thing. And again, it makes sense that you would do this, because every single parent that is acting from a place of love and compassion for their child will naturally try to reduce the risk of suffering and pain that their child will experience. So in this episode, let's work out how to support a 6-year-old who's been telling you that she's been a boy since she was 2.5. And so you can move from being a courageous yet tongue-tied parent to building your evolved communicating family. I want to remind you before we go into these 3 points that every answer that you get on sitting in a car has connection at the center. Remember that, right? That connection is at the center. So let's focus absolutely on your child right now and work out how you can support them to the best of your ability. So point 1, educate yourself about things to do with gender and gender diversity. This is an opportunity to take the lead as a parent and get information about something that is very important to your child. They've come to you and told you this thing when they were very young. So I suppose in the same way that we don't expect our child to educate us about how much screen time is healthy for them or how many vegetables they should be eating, we will attempt to take leadership with our information or what we know about gender too. So there's a great Irish website called GenderedIE, so GenderedIE, which is put together by the lovely people at Belong To, who is an organization that supports gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, LGBTQ, queer, intersex, asexual young people. And so it's a great place to start to learn a bit about gender there. And so you're not asking your child, what does that mean? Why are you saying that? We don't want to use our child as an education tool because that's not connecting. That's something that is sort of divisive. We are absolutely taking the responsibility for our own learning and seeking out information so that we can interact with our child with some understanding. Point number 2, let's call a spade a spade. Our world is not friendly or really set up for gender diverse people. It's a struggle for them. And so wouldn't it be wonderful to have a culture in your family where your child feels seen and heard and understood? Now, again, when we think about ourselves and what are the things we need to do to be able to provide that, one of them would be to learn to sit with our own feelings. It is quite possible, now I don't know for sure, but it is quite possible that you're feeling anxious and afraid about the gender journey or the gender experience that your child will go on for their lifetime. And it's very difficult to show up for our child and be there for them in a connected, building an evolved family. Start again. And it's very difficult to show up for our child when we are very much focused on our difficult emotions. So point number 2 is, how do we learn to sit with difficulty and maybe complexity and suffering and hardship when we see it in our child? Like, what skills do we need to learn for ourselves to be able to sit and support them through hard things? One of the things we learn inside the Evolve School is how we name emotions for ourselves, whether they're difficult emotions or pleasurable emotions, how when we name them, that can help us manage them. So say, for example, I remember a good few years ago, and this is a story of me not managing emotion well, getting a text from one of my kids who was at a disco telling me that some of their friends were vomiting and having trouble staying upright because they drank alcohol. And my kid was feeling very anxious. Now, I'm going to tell you what that felt like for me. I read that text and I was like, my whole body just went into sort of panic mode and fear mode, and my heart raced and my mouth went dry, and I was feeling anxious and afraid, and I couldn't stop moving my body, and I had to do something, and I jumped in the car and I drove over to where disco was, and I was trying to work out what to do. So my brain went foggy and I wasn't able to think clearly, right? That is an example of someone who didn't have the skills to manage complex feelings and emotions around their child managing a very complex thing, right? And so I know now, because I've been doing a lot of work on that, is how to care for myself in moments where I feel like my child is under threat or I'm under threat. What are the strategies I do? And we learn heaps of strategies inside the kindness pillar of the Evolved Family Method. Things to do with our breath and words to use, all sorts of things. There's lots of things. And it takes practice and it takes time, but it's a skill that we learn to care for ourselves. And in the context of this question, it's a skill you learn to be able to show up and care for your child, which is the most important thing when it comes to connection, right? Point number 3. There is a very common piece of advice that is given to parents when it comes to having conversations about sensitive stuff. I see it all the time, and it's about being led by the child. This idea of don't give too much information, notice what's happening with the child, maybe wait for them to ask questions. In this case, it is absolutely the opposite. We are not waiting to be led by our child, and here is why. People that have an experience of gender that is different or not the norm have a really difficult time living in our gendered, binary, rigid society and culture. There is a huge incidence of depression and anxiety and suicide in gender diverse people. So, as a parent, we have an amazing opportunity to give our child the support that they don't get from the outside environment. So that can look like educating yourself about gender, as we've said before, but also start bringing in signs that your family and your house is a friendly place for all sorts of diversity and awesomeness. One of the things you could do is buy a book. I'm going to show you a particular book like this, Who Are You? It's by Brooke Pesson-Wedby, and it's a book about gender. And it's written for very young children, a picture book, right? And it has this super duper thing in the back, which may be for slightly older children, but a wheel that helps work out what sort of body they have, what sort of word they use to describe their gender. So in your case, your child has very clearly told you that their gender is boy. So that wheel will give you a chance to find the boy. And then this part of the wheel out here is about different sorts of things that your child likes. And, one of the beliefs or the teachings that can help us raise children who are free to express their gender in any way that feels exactly right for them. And this is not just for gender questioning, gender fluid, trans children. This is for every child, because every child can feel constricted by their gender, which can be harmful and challenge their mental health if they feel like they can't be who they are. I mean, just a basic example of that would be someone who identifies as a boy and wants to do ballet, for example, or needlepoint, or someone who identifies as a girl and is interested in geology and wants to run an opal mine, thinking about those outback spaces in Australia who are mainly male work environments, just to use as examples, right? So you are actively bringing in resources that allow your child to see themselves reflected in books and videos and different things like that. You could put a rainbow sticker on your fridge. You could actively find not just books specifically about gender, which this one is, but storybooks that have gender neutral or gender diverse characters in them. And that way your child doesn't feel alone, and the rest of the people in your family, maybe you have other children that don't really understand what's going on, can start to see that, oh, hang on a minute, this is just not my sibling. There are lots of resources and lots of examples of gender being something that is not necessarily what we're assigned at birth. So as a quick reminder, before we leave point 3, this is not about pushing your child into a journey of gender or to make them choose something or be something. This is absolutely, though, about creating a culture where they feel permission to be who they are, that they are accepted and loved for exactly as they are. And that will go a long way to helping them feel safe and accepted and connected in their family. So you've just learnt how to talk about gender with a 6-year-old and who has said that they are a boy since they were 2.5. And the question there is the understanding that that child was probably assigned female at birth, which means when they were born, the adults around in that space looked at their body and made the best guess of what gender they were based on their physical appearance. So those 3 points go some way in creating a sense of the things you can do to support your child. But it's no good really unless you have community support and the time to develop the skills of sitting with complex emotions, and both in yourself and in other people. And that's a sort of skill that is hard to do on our own, because one of the ways our nervous system can learn to come into a state of being able to connect and learn and pay attention rather than be on alert for danger or fear or worry, is to be with other nervous systems who feel that same sense of calm and we're safe here. And even though we're talking about gender with a 6.5-year-old, it's okay. That this doesn't mean that something is wrong. And so you may be interested in getting some more support to do this part of your parenting. And one of the best ways I know to do that is to get together with parents who are on the same journey to build deeper connection and an evolved communicating family as their children grow. The Evolve School is one place you can do that. And if you would like to learn when the Evolve School opens next, you can go to sarahsproul.com/evolve and put your name down on the list, and that's all you have to do. I do the rest of the work, so you don't miss out on the chance to find out more about that supportive, kind, compassionate community when it opens next. And that's sitting in a car for another week, where I've answered a question to help you raise your confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. Bye for now. Damn it, hang on. So in this episode, So in this episode, let's talk about how to support